In the summer of 1565, a small Mediterranean island became the stage for one of the most dramatic and intense military confrontations in history. The island was Malta, and the battle that unfolded there would come to be known as the Great Siege of Malta. On one side stood the mighty Ottoman Empire, arguably the most powerful military force of the 16th century, led by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, whose ambitions stretched across continents. On the other side stood a relatively small but fiercely determined group, the Knights Hospitaller, a religious military order committed to defending Christianity. What made this siege extraordinary was not just the scale of the forces involved, but the stark imbalance between them, and how, against all expectations, the defenders managed to survive. Malta was not just another island. Located at the crossroads between Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, it held immense strategic value. Whoever controlled Malta could influence naval trade routes and military movements across the Mediterranean Sea. For the Ottomans, capturing Malta would open the gateway to southern Europe, especially Sicily and mainland Italy. For the Knights Hospitaller, Malta was their last stronghold, granted to them in 1530 after they were expelled from Rhodes. The Knights knew one thing clearly: if Malta fell, their order would likely cease to exist. The Knights Hospitaller were not ordinary soldiers. They were monks and warriors combined, bound by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Their leader during the siege was Jean Parasat de Valette, a seasoned warrior in his 70s. De Valette was not a man to surrender. He understood the gravity of the situation and prepared for the worst. He strengthened fortifications, rationed supplies, and trained both soldiers and civilians. Malta itself had been transformed into a defensive fortress. Key strongholds included Fort St. Elmo, Fort St. Angelo, Fort St. Michael. These forts were not just structures, they were lifelines. In 1565, the Ottoman Empire assembled one of the largest invasion forces of the time. Estimates vary, but historians suggest around 30,000 to 40,000 troops were deployed, including elite janissaries. The Ottoman fleet, commanded by Piali Pasha, and the land forces led by Mustafa Pasha, arrived in Malta in May 1565. Their objective was simple: crush the Knights and take the island. But there was a problem: the Ottomans underestimated their enemy. The Ottomans landed on Malta in May 1565 and quickly surrounded the main defensive positions. Their first target was Fort St. Elmo, a relatively small but strategically important fort guarding the entrance to the Grand Harbor. The Knights knew that St. Elmo would be the first line of defense, and likely the first to fall. What followed was a brutal and relentless bombardment. Cannons roared day and night. Walls crumbled. Fire spread. Yet, the defenders refused to surrender. Fort St. Elmo became the symbol of resistance. For nearly a month, a small group of knights and soldiers held off a vastly superior Ottoman force. Every day, reinforcements were sent into the fort, fully aware that they would likely not return. The defenders fought with unmatched courage. Even when wounded, they continued to stand their ground. Supplies dwindled. The walls were shattered. Death was everywhere. Finally, on June 23, 1565, Fort St. Elmo fell. But it came at a cost. The Ottomans suffered heavy losses, far more than expected. Among the dead was the famed corsair Turgut Reis, whose death was a major blow to Ottoman morale. The fall of St. Elmo was not a victory, it was a warning. With St. Elmo captured, the Ottomans turned their attention to the main towns of Birgu and Singlia, where the Knights had fortified themselves. The siege turned into a war of attrition. The Ottomans launched repeated assaults, using ladders, artillery, and sheer manpower. The defenders responded with everything they had: cannons, muskets, boiling oil, and even improvised weapons. Civilians joined the fight. Women carried ammunition. Children helped the wounded. Everyone became part of the defense. The heat of the Maltese summer added another layer of suffering. Disease spread rapidly among the Ottoman camps. Supplies became strained. Yet the Ottomans pressed on. By August 1565, the situation was critical. The Knights were exhausted. The defenders launched a surprise counterattack. Using clever tactics and intimate knowledge of the terrain, they struck at vulnerable Ottoman positions. This bold move disrupted the Ottoman momentum and boosted the morale of the defenders. At the same time, rumors began to spread that reinforcements from Sicily were on their way. In September 1565, the long-awaited relief force finally arrived. A Spanish-led army from Sicily landed on Malta, bringing fresh troops and renewed hope. Though not overwhelmingly large, their arrival changed everything. The Ottomans, already weakened by months of fighting, disease, and heavy losses, found themselves facing a reinvigorated enemy. The tide had turned. Realizing that the siege was no longer sustainable, the Ottoman commanders made the difficult decision to withdraw. After 4 months of intense fighting, the siege came to an end. Malta had survived. The island was devastated. Thousands had died. Entire structures were reduced to rubble. But the Knights Hospitaller had achieved the impossible. They had stopped one of the most powerful empires in the world.